Our guest today shares his story on how he was able to make the transition from a career in the armed forces to a career in the cloud industry. He shares with us why he decided to leave the armed forces, some of the mistakes he made along the way, how he finally landed his first cloud role, how he dealt with imposter syndrome, and what advice he'd give to someone who was looking to get the first cloud job. This is one of the best episodes we've done and you don't want to miss it. Trust me. Let's get right into it. Welcome to the show, Ross. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good, thanks. The first question I have for you is, I'd like to know more about your time at the armed forces and what made you decide to make a change in your career.
So I spent, give or take, 11 years in the Royal Marines. So straight after college, I signed up and did just 11 years with them. I spent 2 years of that as a signaller or like a radio operator. So you have some tech influence in your career there, but it's not transferable to the cloud. It's almost completely separate. And also I spent the rest of my time as a heavy weapons operator, so not really any transferable civilian skills coming from that. And yeah, I just spent my 20s in the Royal Marines, deployed abroad in operations, and then it gets to a point when I realised I needed to start doing something else in my life away from that scene.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Different people come from different avenues. So some people, they leave their previous work maybe because it's really long hours, or maybe they want more pay, or maybe they just want the opportunity for remote work. What was the trigger that made you go, you know what? I think I want to try something else.
I think a lot of people in the military, they get to that sort of 10-year point and things start to change. Growing up is obviously a big thing. That when you join, you're 18, you're fresh out of school. Life's a one big adventure. Then as you go older, by that point, I had 2 kids, I had a wife. I was away 5 days a week, then away months on every year. The money, while it, for some people it was good. When you've got houses and kids and families, it doesn't particularly go very far. My objectives were I wanted to earn X amount of money, in X amount of years when I left. I wanted to be at home for my kids more because I missed out on, a couple of years of my life with my kids. I wanted to be around more and just have that more stable family kind of, orientated lifestyle with a job that ideally wasn't outside because I was kind of done with being outside after those years. So yeah, that was my main they were my main goals. But at this point, I still didn't know I wanted to go into tech. They were my objectives. How I got there after that was a different story.
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. So once you make that decision that you want to get out, what were your next steps? And I guess we can focus on when you decided that, okay, tech might be a good avenue. What were your next steps in terms of what did you study? What technologies did you learn?
So when you leave the armed forces, you have to give a 12-month termination period. So, it's not, 2 weeks you're out the door. It's a year. So you are locked in for a long time. But in that time, they are good to you. And you can get on courses. You have funding available to you depending on how long you served. But I didn't want to rush into it. I was still, at this point, I was give or take 30. So I knew I had basically whatever I chose now, I could start my whole career again. I spent 2 months of those 12 months not jumping into things and just spending 2 months looking at all the options available. What sector do I want to go into? And then once I made a decision, tech, I always liked tech. I knew nothing really about it, but it appealed to me, like technology. I then started looking down that avenue. And there were a lot of initial pathways for ex-military to get into cyber as either pen testers. And that was, that kind of appealed to me. So I went around looking at avenues for that. How do I get my foot in the door at a low level in cyber? So I basically did some foundation courses like Security Plus, Network Plus, to tick some boxes, and then I had a placement at it's now gone bankrupt or they closed down, a placement center where you basically go and do further training, and after your training, they will then hopefully get you a placement at a company as like an associate. And then COVID happened. And COVID basically just put a train wreck straight through all my plans. All my placement stuff got cancelled. The company stopped doing all their courses. So in a space of about 2 weeks when it all came in, my resettlement went from going pretty well, I was really organised, to having basically nothing and was going to be unemployed in about 2 months after that. So panic button.
That sounds so heartbreaking because I'm sure at this point you're excited to get started, you're ready to go, a new world is opening up for you, and then all of a sudden that whole avenue closes down. Like, how did you feel, and what did you do afterwards?
It was like a basically get punched in the stomach because in hindsight, it was badly thought of my position because I basically put everything into this one placement. So I spent all my time focusing on getting the work done to get placed in this company. And so when that fell through, I kind of had nothing left apart from a few certs. And, I had kids at home and a wife, and I was like, I haven't really got an option here. The options are either I take my notice out, and then basically go back in service with the Royal Marines, which would be at least a minimum another year. I didn't really fancy telling my wife that. So all the option was basically get back together and then come up with a new plan. Probably by this point, I basically cyber was off the tables because it would have been hard to get into anyway. And with COVID, I was like, okay, let's focus on other tech roles. I've already spent 10 months of getting upskilling within tech, most of which at networking levels transferable to most other tech roles. Let's just find a way in and let's do it now. It didn't go particularly well during COVID, living in the Southwest. There's not many jobs anyway in tech. During the lockdown periods, that basically reduced to nothing. And then I left unemployed. I was basically at rock bottom then. I was just thinking, like, what have I done? I left a stable employer to try and make my life better. And it ended up coming full circle when I was in a worse place than I'd been in the last 12 years. So I then eventually got a placement at a company as an IT support in an IT support role in which you're a first line service desk technician. And that's where I started my career in tech at the very sort of the IT support level, doing general queries with, from turning on laptops, not turning on, all the way to, emails and the kind of basic stuff that you do on that role.
I mean, I just want to acknowledge the difficulty you went through because I feel like this is something we all kind of take for granted because I know a lot of people who want to get into the cloud industry, and because there's no real deadline, they sort of take their time and there's a lot of dilly-dallying. But, it sounds like in your case, it was literally like, I need something, anything, or else, I'd have to go back to the armed forces or or another option that wasn't right for you. And so, that I think encouraged you to take on an opportunity that might not have been ideal, but at least got you on a step to where you needed to go. Because IT support and help desk is actually a really great way of, getting into the cloud because you're using a lot of the fundamental technologies like networking, database, security, all of that. And, it gives you a lot more options. So, turns out getting into IT security was, I guess, a good step in that direction. I'd love to know where you went from there because you did IT security for a bit, but ultimately you made that transition. So I'd be interested to hear that journey. So, are you interested in getting your first cloud job? If you answered yes, then I have a free guide just for you. This free guide walks you through a proven step-by-step process to help you get that first cloud job. It walks you through the 3 simple steps you can take today to make yourself highly employable. The link is in the description below, so make sure you download it now if you're interested. All right, let's get back to the show.
My support role at my first company was, as you said, it was something. And I take nothing away from them. They gave me a job when I needed it the most, and this is at no point reflecting on their company, but it wasn't for me. It was kind of repetitive. You have the same calls every day. This won't work. This won't turn on. And I needed to get out of there as soon as I could. I was still working hard in the evenings. I was basically just either studying or working full time. I was either working in the day and then studying all night because I knew I needed to upskill. I looked for other jobs.
Let's take a pause on that because I think this is quite important. What were you studying in the evening? What sort of materials were you working?
At this point, I knew regardless of where I wanted to go, it was either a programming language, so I was learning Python, Bash, writing basic scripts, and just things like that, learning about Git and GitHub, working with those technologies. So back then I still didn't really know exactly where I wanted to go, but I knew from, researched in my own time that what are the things that are transferable to almost any IT role. And they are, I'm not saying you got to be a software engineer, but, can you write a Python, basic Python scripts or, to automate tasks, staying with Bash, Linux obviously goes without saying, and obviously Git's used in most applications, or a lot from my experience anyway. So those are the ones I was just trying to tick off. I'd go on YouTube and be like, okay, how do I learn this? And then how YouTube works. Next thing you know, you're on video. You then look. You then see something else. Oh, there's Docker. Docker's really important. Everyone's talking about Docker. Okay, let's go learn Docker, or at least get a. And it kind of got like an obsession. And yes, there are probably technologies I spent too much time on learning that weren't valuable at the time. But I was just like, the more I ingest now, the better I'm going to be in 6 months' time. And that's kind of how I lived my life for a while. There's a lot of long evenings, but it kind of paid dividends in the end. It wasn't this structured. I'd love to give you the answer that it was really structured, and I went and did a 4-week Linux course, or I did at this early time, it was very much like, okay, let's just learn whatever you can. Just in the evening, spend 3 hours, learn something a night. After all,
Yes.
it builds.
And what I love about your story is that it's very similar to mine. I got into the cloud like 6, 7 years ago. And back then, the cloud wasn't really a thing that people knew about. But similar to you, I was in a job I didn't like, and I knew that I wanted to do something in technology.
Yeah,
And similar to you, I thought Linux, that seems like something people use. And so I just started learning Linux, and that led to Bash, and that led to deploying web servers. And like I spent a lot of time like learning for a while. I was like, oh, how do I do front end development? And how do I do this? So you sort of go down these rabbit holes. But I love what you said, that it was an obsession, because it was the same for me, where like every day after work, I do like 2 hours,
yeah,
every day religiously. And I just built that into my routine. And the reason I think it's important to highlight is because, now the cloud is a lot more popular, and a lot of people think it's really easy to get into. A lot of people think, oh, I just do a couple of certifications and I'm in. And what I try to get across a lot of the time is that it's really important to build those skills, those Linux skills, and almost you have to enjoy the
yeah.
process, because it's going to take longer than you think, and you're going to need to learn a lot more than you think. And so I like that idea of like, doing it every day after work, engaging with it, learning different things. And I just thought it was really, really important to highlight that.
No,
So yeah, you're doing this. Yeah, go for it.
you can't do a lot of things without learning the base. I think that's the people forget is, I see it on LinkedIn and other places now. People go away and do certs, but they don't have the basic understanding of the things behind the certs. They go away and they can click a few buttons, but to actually go and to actually understand Linux and other technologies, you need to have a foundation level first before you start doing other things. Because going and doing a solution architect exam is pointless if you haven't got the basic fundamental skills to go with it. So don't sleep on them. That's my advice. And I'm guilty of kind of doing it myself in times, but looking back on it now, the foundations are the most important piece.
Yeah, and a lot of people do it because they just don't know
Yeah,
better.
I know.
Because and that's the point of this podcast, like where we're getting some awareness out there. So really, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so you're in your first job, your first IT support role. It's not really for you until you're working evenings, weekends, putting in the work to sort of progress yourself. What comes after that?
I was kind of forced in my first company. I was on a temporary contract, and they weren't giving me any assurances of my future. And I'm very much kind of, I don't like getting messed around. So I was looking for jobs, and there was another straight away on LinkedIn was a company I work for now. Unlike my first employer, where IT support supported their business that wasn't tech focused, this was an IT company. So everyone there, worked in tech or was evolved around tech and IT. And I was like, okay, this could be a way in to get my foot in the door with no real experience outside of IT support. So I applied, went really well. And I was there as a IT support / operations analyst for about a year, just shy of a year, I believe. So we were IT support mainly, but we also had very limited, which is my first actual interaction with the cloud, is we would have very limited interaction with accounts, so like on a monitoring level, cognitive pool users, CloudWatch dashboards and monitoring. And that's when I realized, maybe this avenue of work is to me, because I'm working with other teams there, like the SRE teams. I was like, what they do is like kind of like us, but on steroids. They're fixing things, they're making things are up. I was like, I want a piece of that. So I basically just I work there. I kind of want to say that prove myself to be reliable. I'm a big fan of like just being a hard worker. Don't be late. Don't have all the time off in the world. Just work hard, prove yourself, be reliable. And I basically asked enough questions to enough people, or I annoyed them enough with asking them, how do I get from where I am now to, not doing what they're doing now because some of them are seniors, but I get a foot in the door at the lowest level, but in a different team.
Yes, I think this is really good to highlight as well, because what I like about your story is that you managed to convert what was basically an IT support role into a cloud engineer role, and you did it within the same company. And the reason I think this is important is because a lot of people think they need to go to like a new organization to become a cloud engineer or whatever they want to do. But I find it's potentially easier to do it from the company you're already in if they have, a cloud division or some cloud competency. So what would you say like 2 or 3 things you did that helped you get on the radar of the cloud team and help you make that transition?
I would say firstly, you've got to make it known that you want to transition, because if you don't tell anybody, no one's going to sit there and be like, oh, what if Ross wants to go to cloud? No one's going to think that. That's not their job to do that. It's on you. You've got to take some ownership of your own career. I'm not saying you go and ask for to go and be a CEO or something. You ask for a respectable request, to go in at a low level, transition across. I didn't ask for more money. I just said I just wanted to move across and just change my role. I also think asking questions not to your like managers, but to your peers. So there are people in the cloud team, and when you're sat in meetings, they're engaging with you. Like, ask questions back, show that you're interested. So when they go back and talk to other people, they'll be like, oh, he does ask questions. He does, might not know what he's talking about all the time, but he'll ask questions. He'll give his input. And even if, you're wrong, it's best to be engaged than sit there. So I would say that you've got to engage with your peers who are in those roles, make yourself known, and just be reliable, because they're not going to give you a chance if you're the kind of person they don't think trustworthy. I'm not saying you've got to be the perfect golden child, but don't be late to meetings. Work hard, get your work done on time, and just be that reliable employee, and then they're more inclined to take a chance on you than if you're the kind of guy or girl who phones in late 4 days a week. Nothing crazy, just just do the basics well and get your face known.
I think, yeah, you've inspired me. I've just come up with I'm calling it the 3-step internal cloud transition protocol, right? So the 3 steps to get into the cloud. And like from what you're saying, I can see step 1, do the fundamentals, actually do the work, get hands-on with Linux, with Bash, with scripting, with cloud technologies, actually have something ready to go. Step 2, communication. Reach out to peers in the cloud team, find out, what they do, how you can get involved, and, make them aware that you're interested in this opportunity. And so you actually get on their radar. And step 3 is make the ask, actually make a request like, hey guys, is something going on? Like, can I help in any way? I'm willing to start at low level. I'm just so excited. I just want to get involved. And I think that's a really good framework people can use if they have a cloud division and they want to get involved, because I think by doing those 3 things, that would really help people get on the radar.
And this is where I'd say, so I'm not a cert chaser by any means, because I think a lot of certs, they're paper, they don't really prove anything. They should validate your skills, but they're not a proof of like your ability really, because you can just pass an exam. But this is where I would say certs, from my experience, have a value. So when I first started, I had no certs. They had no way of proving that I had any real knowledge of the cloud outside of my day-to-day work and me saying, oh, but I do study in the evenings. This is what I went and did. I know it's the sort of the lowest of the low for cloud certs, the cloud practitioner, AWS cloud practitioner exam certification. So, it gives you that fundamental knowledge across all the services. And at least they know then that, you have got a cert. You've gone away and spent, even the bottom cert, it still takes, from scratch, it does take a while to actually learn and pass the exam. So I then use that as a method to be like, I've got something now. I'm not just another person. I've taken what you said on board. I've went and go and got a cert. So now I have kind of a merit and be like, now I've got this. How about now? And eventually, by the way, it didn't happen overnight either. This was like probably from me requesting it to actually getting it took about 6 months. So don't expect it to be like Monday morning you asked and Tuesday you're in. And then my employer is great. Like I have absolutely no not a bad word to say about them. I understand they've got responsibilities, so that they said to me, okay, I think I started in like October time. They said, go away. You're going to do half your time in IT support, so we don't lose that service, and then half your time every day you'll be an associate cloud engineer, and you'll be working with the cloud team on some internal projects away from clients. And then you can start using Terraform and our cloud accounts in a real work environment, not just, creating your own sort of stuff at home, which is, as much as you can learn it, it's not the same as actually doing it in real time when it's all, you've got your Jira projects and everything else. And so, yeah.
I think that's great because a lot of the time, I think people are willing to give a chance to other people when they see they've done the work, right? Like you say, it took about 6 months to go from when you asked to when you actually got started. And I'm sure they observed something in you in terms of how you communicated with them. Maybe you're passionate about the cloud. So I think people notice these things and they go, you know what, there's something about Ross. Let's give him a chance on this. Because there's some people, they might make that ask, but like, they don't have anything to show for it. Like maybe they haven't done the certs or they haven't done any projects. And it's just like, I'd like to do the cloud, but there's nothing else really deeper there. So I think, yeah, definitely, I'm sure some of that came through. Now that you're in the cloud industry, what would you say some of the day-to-day responsibilities are as a cloud engineer? Because a lot of people don't really know what a cloud engineer does. So if you could give maybe some insight into day-to-day, what kind of tasks you're doing.
So I can't talk about too many specifics because of the clients, but so my role is in the company, of which there's many different roles. So I do a lot of live service support for clients. Any issues they raise or improvements, we can jump on board and make them, resolve them in a timely manner. We do a lot of security patching, hardening the infrastructure as and when things change, as they always do in tech. Infrastructure as code, be it, you've got many different IAC tools. So depending on what project it is, it could be Terraform, it could be one of the other providers of tools. So writing that, obviously you've got every day you're using Linux, especially with my role, you're writing a lot of bash stuff and Python scripts to automate your tasks because there's a lot, obviously you're dealing with large chunks of data or resources. You can't just do things manually, which is one of the things I want to say to people who are learning, don't learn things in the console because they just won't help you in reality because most companies, if not all, it'll all be infrastructure as code because ClickOps is not the answer. So whatever you learn on the exams, and I would say I think I learned, and what my mentor told me is if you do a certification or an exam, so let's say you do the cloud practitioner exam, and they're talking about creating an S3 bucket in the console, do it all in Terraform or CloudFormation or something else. So you need to know how you would do it in reality, because in reality you're not going to be building S3, you're not going to be building EC2s in the console. You're going to be doing all infrastructure as code, and that is the main thing you have to learn. Is the console's there to help you.
Yeah,
it shouldn't really be done from there.
I think you've pointed out some really key things, and again, this goes back to the idea of why people should do projects and learn Linux and learn Terraform and CI/CD, because this is what employers are looking for. Like, this is what you're going to be doing in the job. And so if you're a candidate and you apply for jobs and you haven't done any projects with Terraform, you're not comfortable on a Linux command line, you're not comfortable troubleshooting issues, then you're just not going to stand out to employers because that's what they need. And a quick tip for people who want to learn Terraform, and this is what I did when I was learning all of this, is I'd actually first create the infrastructure in the console and then do it in Terraform afterwards, because then, it was easier to iron out the kinks, especially at the start when you don't really know what you're doing. That's a little hack for people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and it's what I do up to anyway, or at least go through the motions of making it, because sometimes it does. It's not always easiest to work out how the code reflects to reality without, especially using something new. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I just to say, I think a lot of people who get involved in cloud, and maybe in my early days as well, when I first started, was you kind of think that just working with services is all you do. All you're going to do is create EC2s and this and that. But in reality, the skill set you need is, and I'm only towards the beginning of my career. I'm not saying I'm a wizard, but the skill set you need across multiple tech stacks is long, and It's not just a case of being able to go and write YAML in CloudFormation or Terraform. You need to go away and learn Docker, and there's Kubernetes, which is a whole new beast by itself. So you got to know, once you get into it, it's kind of it's a rabbit hole that never ends, and it's just
Yeah.
and you just got to be prepared to learn and learn and learn. I don't mean chase certs. I mean learn the skills. The certs will come in time, but just
I like to tell people that getting the job, once you actually get the job, that's when the real work begins. Because I think there's this idea of, you get a job in the cloud and everything's okay and everything's easy. And it's like, no, that's when the hard work, because now you have deadlines, you have clients, you have people looking up to you, people expecting you to perform. And which is why I think it's so important to building that learning habit early.
Yes.
So I know with me in my career, like, like what we're talking about earlier, like after work, 2 hours, you learn. And I found for me, like once I actually started working, that habit continued because like you said, now you're learning things for the client, you're learning things that you want to progress. So the habit of learning outside of work actually is still relevant, even once you do break into the cloud or even once you do have a cloud job. And so, yeah, I just thought it was important to highlight that for people.
On that is the amount you learn once you get in a role. You'll learn the amount you improve is you can't even put a total on it. Like you can learn a lot studying by yourself in the evenings, not working in a role. But as soon as you land that role, you're learning for 8 hours a day. Let's say for the average person, that's 8 hours a day of constant studying, writing code, working with services. You kind of go from that gradual learning process, and then you just kind of skyrocket up. Which I look back now at where I come from, and like I said, I'm still relatively junior. Compared to some people, is how far and how much you can learn it from kind of square one of no knowledge in, I've been in the cloud now for 3 years, give or take. And it's like, I'm a different person. I wouldn't believe you if I told you where I was now 3 years ago. So don't be worried about how much you've got to learn. You can always be proud about how much you have learned, and you worry about that rather than worrying about how much left there is to learn, because it's the cloud and it's kind of endless. You're never going to know everything.
You're never going to know everything. And to your point as well about how much you learn when you get the job, I run a program called the Cloud Career Accelerator Program. And the idea is that I have courses where everything we talked about, Linux, Bash, Terraform, Git, CI/CD, like there's projects that gets built. And the idea of that program is, look, I'm not here to teach you everything about Linux. I'm not here to teach you everything about Terraform. I'm here to teach you enough so you can build projects, build your confidence in it. And the idea is you just need to have the skills that employers are looking for, because once you actually get the job, that's when the real learning comes in. And I sort of go off the 80-20 rule where, like, I'm sure you use Linux all the time. And let's say there's 100 Linux commands you could know, but you're probably using 20 of those commands on a daily basis. So you don't need to spend all the time learning out the 100 commands. Just learn the top 20, use them regularly. And same with Terraform, same with all these technologies. And then once you actually get the job, you can then have that on-demand learning. So it's like, oh, I need to use this specific thing. Okay, I'll Google how to use it. I feel comfortable. And then you can go with that. So that's some ways in which the learning comes into play.
Make notes as well. That's another thing. Make notes. Those various commands. Not just kind of but those just, you're doing a role, you're doing a task, and you have to run some really specific command that you're probably not going to run again for like another 400 days, give or take. But you just save it wherever you put your notes are, with a little bit of, with just a one line being what it does, because I guarantee at some point again you'll need either to run that command or something similar, and that will save you 10-15 minutes Googling that, and you do that for everything you run. Sooner or later you have an encyclopedia at your fingertips.
That's a top tip, because you will not believe how many times I kicked myself because I spent so much time troubleshooting something, figuring out a command, then like, cool, it's done, I'm never going to need this again. And then 3 months later the exact same scenario comes up and I'm like, I should have written it down somewhere. Now I'll have to do the whole thing again. So yeah, that's a top tip. What would you say are some challenges of working in the cloud industry?
I would say, I think the elephant in the room is breaking into the industry, because I think regardless of what, I've got peers that went to boot camps and got in successfully. Obviously you've got the uni route, which I think is probably that's some more common route around. I haven't been to uni, so I don't want to comment on that one, but that's probably one of the more pronounced routes. So getting in is hard. and you have to really work for it. Okay, and then for my imposter syndrome, which I know most people probably have suffered in some form, whether they admit it or not. I think most people have had imposter syndrome in one role. I get it. I don't get it as bad now, but the first few years when it was kind of like, because of my avenue going in, where I didn't have the uni background, I kind of, and a lot of my peers did, I've kind of felt, do they think I'm worthy to be here? Am I worthy to be here? Should I be here? Can I be here? And then eventually you learn enough and you prove yourself in projects, and then that kind of goes away over time. But there's still daily issues when a problem comes in and you kind of like, am I cut out for this? But it passes with time. So that's a big issue. And if you do have that, whatever role you're in, you are worthy and you are doing well enough. It's a human instinct, I guess, isn't it?
I'll tell you something, Ross. It doesn't pass with time. It's still there. The reason is because, as you progress with your career, like the challenges change. And so it's now a whole new set of imposter syndromes. Okay, I get the troubleshooting. I can do that. Now, okay, I need to design architecture. What does that mean? How does that work? And there's this huge project I'm in charge of, and I don't quite know if I can do it, but I'll give myself a go. So yeah, it's definitely something. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to say as well about what you mentioned about breaking into the cloud industry. I actually don't think university is the best path, because I know from my experience and all the colleagues I've worked with, a lot of them come from just other industries, because the cloud is relatively new.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times universities aren't actually teaching cloud skills. It's still more software development, that sort of background. And so like my background is geography. That's what I went to university for. Nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with the cloud. I think the most successful people actually don't even come from a technology background, or a lot of them didn't. One of the best colleagues I worked with, he didn't go to university either. He just got into the cloud, did the work. And I think that's one of the great things about it, is that, if you do the work, then you can make it happen. It's not like medicine where you need to go to university for 10 years or whatever. The final thing I wanted to say about, when you mentioned it's really difficult to break in, I actually had a thought about that this morning, because that's almost the good thing about it in a way, because it's a relatively high barrier to entry, which means that if you can get in, it's very well paid. It's very creatively stimulating, because if it was easy to get in, then it wouldn't be as valuable. Working in retail is relatively easy to get in, but the pay is crap and no one wants to do it. So it's almost for those who can get through and build the skills to get the requirements to get into the industry, the rewards are great. So it's kind of like a double-edged thing,
The
in a
rewards
way, that high barrier to entry.
It is like where I am now, and after all the grinding and the late nights and the stress, it is absolutely, because it's completely changed my life. I went from being completely skint, couldn't take my kids on holiday. I had debt piling up from my time in the military, and having no money after the mortgage and the bills came out. I couldn't really do anything in my life. To now, and debt free, go holiday with my kids. We're happy. Money's not so much. I'm not rolling around in a Bentley, but money's not an issue anymore. It's not a worry every night. And yeah, it's hard to get in, but it's absolutely whatever you've got to do to get into the job role within reason. I would honestly do it. Just work hard. Isn't that long? Let's say you take a year of just studying, or even less. People probably do it in much less than me, who are far more intelligent than me, do it in less time than that. You can do it. You genuinely can. It's not. I'm not a rocket scientist. I would say I'm a relatively normal bloke who just worked hard and had a goal and got there. You haven't got to be anything special to get into cloud. Obviously, it's just hard work and a bit of grind.
Yeah, yeah, basically that's it. It's just, if you're willing to put in some hard work, some elbow grease, and some time, then I genuinely think it's attainable. Because again, same, I'm no rocket scientist. I mean, my next question was going to be, what do you enjoy the most about working in the cloud industry? So maybe you could add to what you said.
So I mean, I'm going to give you a slightly biased answer here. So I'm fortunate enough that I work from home most days, and I kind of wanted a job. I didn't plan for this, because when I put my notice in to leave, this wasn't really a thing, home working. So Firstly, a lot of cloud roles I know are either hybrid, remote, so you have that flexibility of being able to work from home because obviously all your resources are in the cloud for most of them. So, which is great for me. I have kids, bit of a selfish answer. So it's one for myself that I really enjoy being able to work from home. Another one is, again, the pay. But also in terms of the role, I really enjoy the troubleshooting side of it. And, you get given a ticket or a task. Okay, I want this end state. And, I can go away and give my ideas of how do we get there if there's different avenues. And then we agree. And then you go away and then there's the next period you go away and build it. I just love that. It's almost like being like a little child again with Lego. You have a little project idea and you can go away and build it. And that's how I just enjoy making things and building them, and that kind of self-fulfilling growth you get working in the cloud, that, you do something, you learn from it, and the next time you can go away and you can build it slightly better, or or you can go back and then improve it when you've learned new things, new technologies. And I like that kind of cycle of learning, and it's just it's nice.
Yeah.
I can't really describe it. It just works. It's just a nice.
I really like what you said about, being like a kid with Legos and the troubleshooting. And I'll just give a quick example to illustrate this. Like, I'm the least handy person. Like, I don't do DIY. I don't fix anything. And I remember I was renting a flat in London, and one winter morning the boiler broke and there was like an error on the screen. And me previously, I'd have just called the landlord, like, hey, the boiler's broken, come fix it. And that would have probably taken a couple of days. But because I'd spent a lot of time in the cloud industry troubleshooting, I could see there was an error coming up on the boiler. So I was like, okay, let me Google this error and see what comes up. And so I Googled it and I found some articles on how to fix it, pulling this lever here, pressing this button there. And I did it, and that fixed the boiler. And I was like, oh, wow, like, me before learning troubleshooting and all of this, I'd have just been like, nope, I don't know what to do, and I'm not going to do anything. And I would have probably had to sit in the code for a couple of days before it got fixed. But with those skills, I felt really empowered to, try something, and it worked out.
Like, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, and it's just a great little job to do, and then troubleshooting as well. Like, it can be frustrating and it's hard, and you do doubt yourself at times, but that feeling you get when you crack it, when you finally find the answer and then it works, is pretty rewarding, and that's what I like.
I mean, you've been very generous. You've shared great perspective on the cloud industry. The last question I have is the one a lot of people want to know about. What advice would you give to someone looking to get their first cloud role? And I'm sure you've mentioned nuggets of it, but if you could summarize that into sort of a point or two, what advice would you give to someone looking to get their first cloud role?
The way I've done it, I like, it is a path to do it. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, and there's probably more streamlined way to doing it, but look around at your options first. Are there boot camps? Are there mentor courses to go down? And make sure you learn the right thing firstly. So make sure you're learning what you need to learn, because you could waste hours and weeks learning things that you think relate to the cloud, and they can do down the line. But to get you in at an associate level or junior level, you don't need to go and learn certain things. That will come with time. So make sure you learn the right things, and just be prepared to work hard, and don't take no for an answer. People can do it. You will get there eventually. Just keep working. Connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm not the best at LinkedIn. I'm not a LinkedIn sort of influencer and message every day and build, but just go on there, add people or add organizations like AWS or Azure. Look at their posts, so you see new technology coming up. You look at the comments, people's issues, what they're enjoying, respond to people, and then you can build connections. So you then have recruiters on your LinkedIn, and then that gives you options. If the role comes up first, so you can see the role, you can see the description, what skills you need, and then you can be like, if everyone's saying one thing you haven't got, maybe you need to go away and be like, oh, I don't know anything about that. I'm going to go away and spend a couple of weeks learning that, and just apply. All they can say is no, and you can have an interview. Be completely out your depth, and then use that as a learning experience, and then the next time you can go away and you've learned something from that. So I think the main thing is just work hard and be prepared to study, and it won't happen overnight, but it is achievable and you can do it. Just stay positive. Just stay positive is the main thing.
Thanks a lot, Ross. I think that's the perfect advice. I mean, that's exactly what I would say as well. If people wanted to connect with you, would LinkedIn be the best way if they wanted to ask questions or just say thank you for this interview? Would LinkedIn be the best place for you?
Add me on LinkedIn. My name's Ross Brook. I'm like I said, I'm not a fountain of knowledge. I don't know everything about everything, but for people who kind of see themselves in me a bit, I don't mean for the military background. I mean from any background who want to start again. I will always help you. Any questions? If this helps one person, be more than worth it. So yeah, add me up just for a chat. If you want advice, yeah, go for it. Feel free.
Awesome. And I'll put the link in the description below. Thanks again for coming on, Ross. And yeah, I'm sure you've helped a lot of people with this episode.